What's the event here today?
The event today is organised by the World Congress of Faiths, of which I'm secretary, and it is to promote genuine, open-minded interfaith dialogue. That is the way to build a global harmony and a peaceful world.
The essence of today's event is exploring the future contribution of UK faith communities with respect to UK society, how this will be enhanced as part of interfaith cooperation, and the joint steps to be taken. The faith representation at this event, in terms of representative roles of speakers and workshop leaders, is varied, so that discussions are enriched through the contribution. Each are equal and have something valuable to offer to society. The size of adherents of the mentioned faiths in global terms are as follows. A question: do religious scriptures have an innate propensity towards unity, disunity, or both with ensuing outcomes? An answer: it is important to note that it is religious followers that cause unity or disunity, and not religious scriptures. I mentioned the profound and common occurrence of a psychosociological phenomenon known as in-group and out-group, and commonly known as us and them. I espouse the core construct within religions in terms of relations towards each other is the golden rule: treat others as you want them to treat you. That in principle is a counterbalance to us and them. I will propose the following process for implementing interfaith-based benefits. The steps between the second and seventh are required to be periodically or conditionally repeated in order to sustain and improve benefits and to be dynamically responsive to changes in society. Unity amongst faith communities is a source of benefit to the whole society, whilst maintaining the unique identity of each faith community. Unity does not mean a melting pot approach to religions, because we appreciate that people of faith respect both the commonalities and particularly the differences.
It's an honour to be here today, and I want to start off with a little story that one or two of you I know will find very familiar. It's about the Jewish chap who was shipwrecked on a desert island. And he was there for years and years without any hope of rescue. And finally, several years later, he spotted a ship in the distance. He lit a fire. He sent up a signal, and the ship came to rescue him from the desert island. And before he went off on the ship back to civilization, he invited the captain of the ship to see what he'd built on his desert island. Along the beach, he showed him a rather fine structure built of palm leaves and wood, and he said, "This is my synagogue." And the captain was looking at this with great admiration, and he looked further along the beach, and there was another structure that looked just the same, built of wood and palm leaves, rather beautiful. And he said to the chap, and what's that over there? Is that another synagogue? He said, "That synagogue? I wouldn't be seen dead going into that synagogue." So this is a nice joke that Jews are fond of telling one another about the divisions within our community, because indeed we have many divisions: liberal, orthodox, reform, Masorti, and numerous other different kinds of synagogues, depending on how traditional, how liberal, how progressive, etc. People in the Jewish community are. But this illustrates a truth about religions generally. I doubt that any of us from any religious tradition could say that there aren't similar kinds of divisions within our community. There are different strands, different teachings, different styles of worship, and we tend to be vociferous. We tend to split apart, and you mentioned that in your talk, Pejman. That's the nature of human beings, that over time different approaches arise and we split apart. And with religions generally, I suppose, it's the same tendency. Throughout much of history, the tendency of religions has been to separate from one another, to say ours is the correct way of worshipping God, we have a special relationship with God, if indeed we believe in a personal God, some religions don't, and building the walls up and keeping separate, tests of belief or practice for belonging or being an outsider, and in, as you said, us and them. And this has been, for most of our human history, the character of religions. From time to time, there have been attempts to come together in dialogue, in discussion, but more often than not, it's been hostile rather than friendly. So what we're engaged in here is a rather new occurrence in human history. Since the 19th century, since the World Congress of Faiths was established, since interfaith groups began to grow up in this country in the 1920s.
Very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I thank the organizers for this beautiful organization in this beautiful place here. I thought of talking about ethics of dialogue and engagement. And if you look at, for example, Islam or the Quran, it has emphasized a lot the concept of ethics and spirituality. Even many Muslims think that Islam is a very legalistic religion, when in fact the scholars of hermeneutics or exegesis, interpretation of Islamic scripture, do believe that out of 6,000 verses in the Quran, only 500 are legal verses. Do, don't do. The rest about what? This is my question. I've questioned myself all the time. I've asked this question myself. So basically, the 90% of it is about spirituality, it's about ethics. Only yesterday, I was reminded of a very important prophetic saying, ittaqillah haythma kunt, wa atba'i sayyid al-hasanah tamhuha, wa khaliqin nasa bi khuluqin hasan. Fear Allah, fear God wherever you are, whether you are in the mosque or in the marketplace, anywhere, fear God, taqwa. And then follow bad with good. If somebody does bad to you, don't treat them badly, treat them nicely. This is a higher level. And then khaliqin nasa bi khuluqin hasan. Deal with the people, not Muslims or believers, people in the best manner. So for me, the concept of ethics is a very important Quranic concept. And actually the concept of taqwa, God fearing or God consciousness, is a very primordial ethical value within Islam, from which other ethical values spring. And from this perspective, I would like to talk and emphasize the importance of engagement between religious communities, really. Towards the end of Prophet's life, he sent letters, he sent envoys to different people, the Persians, the Romans, to this conversation, which is based on the Quranic ethical value. Many times when I read the Quran, the concept of nas, people, tell people good, deal with people good. وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. So, but unfortunately, some of the Muslims and non-Muslims as well don't understand this very important Quranic concept. So the concept of dialogue is very important. I was talking with my...
I'm also wearing a white poppy. Today's Remembrance Day, and a lot of people wearing red poppies. A few people wear white ones. Some people wear both. And I think it is an illustration. We could say that they're complementary. The red poppy is saying something about remembrance and about blood and violence and loss. And the white poppy is saying something about, I hope, about hope, and that we need to work for peace and suffer for peace. So, but complementarity is a good word because it's inclusive, but it's a bad word if it means we stand off each other and don't be true to what we believe. And there's something quite subtle there. I mean, I think in being able to really welcome each other and respect each other, but also to accept different points of view and not suppress them. Yes, I'm a Catholic Christian, and I think Christianity has a quite shameful record of division in history, which in the last century we've taken steps to try and mend.
Aren't we all nice people? Yeah. The subject which I was given to speak on was non-violence. And as those of you who have perhaps studied Indic faiths and Indian history, you've probably come across the word ahimsa, which everybody nods, and we all know that it means non-violence. But it's a remarkable coincidence struck me as I was sitting here, and when Pejman had said this is what we'd like to speak to you on. Earlier this year, we had booked a committee room in the House of Parliament to do a talk on ahimsa, non-violence, and it's been booked about 2 or 3 months in advance. The day came, and I arrived to have this conversation, and we had MPs coming in and out, and it was the day when the lower chamber was actually deciding to embark on airstrikes in Syria, completely the antithesis of a moment of non-violence. So we were having very interesting conversations with them, and today I'm here talking about non-violence, again at somebody else's behest, on Remembrance Sunday, when I've just been engaged in remembering the lives of very valiant souls who sacrificed their own existences for our freedoms. So somewhere somebody or something is saying, Satish, talk to these people about non-violence. So I'm going to try and squeeze non-violence into 5 minutes, which in itself is an act of violence. But we have a prayer from one of our oldest scriptures, the Rig Veda, and it says whenever people of differing traditions and journeys meet, there is an invocation that we use to create a container within which that dialogue can be conducted. So I'll start with that invocation. It's only 2 or 3 lines. But in essence, it's, may divinity guide us and nourish us and protect us. May we learn from each other in a spirit of harmony, trust and affection. May our efforts together be rewarded with illumination, which we carry into our own communities. And may there never be harsh words between us. So whenever 2 people sit to share knowledge, this is the invocation that we use, and I would commend it to the House, and hopefully it will guide and nourish us on this engagement. Non-violence. Being from the tradition, and I love saying this whenever you're here, Pejman, being from the tradition of infidel idol worshippers, as we're known, there are a couple of warnings that I'll toss in. Firstly, being an infidel, it would be an act of violence for me to expect you to believe anything I say. So feel free not to be offended by anything that I say. You don't have to accept it at all. Now, turning to this notion of interfaith and non-violence and respect, we are known as a Hindu community for not really engaging in interfaith. In fact, we're often dragged into it fighting, screaming and kicking, because our belief is that until we have learned to walk alone without harming the other, you have nothing to offer to interfaith.
Interfaith here, we've been sort of participating, reminds me of my my presidential predecessor, Dadabhai Naoroji, back in 1893 at the World Parliament of Religions, again participating in the first Interfaith International Conference in recent times. And it reminds me here why I bring this particular episode is because the association which I represent, called the Zoroastrian Trust Funds of Europe, which happens to be the oldest Asian or Indian religious voluntary organization in this country, we actually started to participate actively in modern times in interfaith was very much back in the early 1990s. And one of our first public sort of engagement on interfaith happened to be in this very building in 1993 for the World Parliament of Religions, which the Brahma Kumaris that time did, which was in the main auditorium. So in a sense where today is coming back full circle And it sort of reminds me that I was coming today just now, because there's quite a heck challenge coming here today because of all the traffic and all that. And it gave me a bit of time to contemplate on what it was like today. So in a sense, it was deja vu. And thank you very much for inviting me today.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you all.
I've got slightly concerned about the camera there because what I'm going to say won't be necessarily agreed by the Diocese of London or the Church of England. So I want to make it absolutely clear that I'm speaking my own views, but I think it's much more fun if we say what we feel rather than what we're told to say. And I think it's a matter of taking risks. And I want to say that the risk of letting go is something that I think Christians should commend to themselves this afternoon. And I say this because one of our very ancient hymns in the New Testament talks about Jesus emptying himself, taking the form of a slave, and being born in human likeness, and being found in that human form, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. So this idea of self-emptying, theologians talk about it as kenosis, self-emptying. And there's this point here of the divine being intimately involved in suffering. That may not commend itself to some of the people here, but it may be that our traditions can say that we should be allied with the divine cause, and some may go on to say that the divine may be allied with our cause. And what I want to suggest is that the idea of self-emptying should undergird how Christians approach working in a country now which houses multiple faiths and also people who have none. What can't be denied is that many of our institutions in this country were founded by Christians and at one time had a Christian.
The Buddha went out on search of the causes of suffering, of affliction, 2,500 years ago. And what he found eventually was a nightmare. His night of enlightenment was a night of nightmares. He saw people going to war within themselves, within their communities, within their countries, again and again, after century after century after century. And seeing it, staying with the pain, he found some causes. He found, yes, we try and escape from old age, sickness, suffering, death, having what we don't want, wanting what we can't have, and all the mental afflictions that come from that. And I became a Buddhist and eventually a Buddhist nun because my background was psychology. I worked with people with mental health problems, addictions, and it all spoke very true to me. And in the time since I learnt about this, I've worked in a number of different countries, using what I've learnt about how we try and escape for what's going on inside ourselves, and we cause more and more harm to ourselves and others. And looking for ways to stop. So Buddhism's very practical. All the different kinds of meditations and stuff are to help us stop and see what's really going on, starting off with our own heads. And then we can go on a different path. And that path, from a small view of life to a bigger view, enables us to be with others, be grounded ourselves, and help others.
I really wanted to explore an issue that's facing society at the moment, which is division, and really see how not just interfaith, but religion as a broad force can really contribute towards this, and specifically with division, but the role and the effect that type of dialogue we have publicly, what effect does that have, essentially? So we see at the moment, I don't need to elaborate the specific instances, but this year it's been made very clear that our society, Western societies, are very, very divided. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of lack of understanding of especially on the political, but also the religious and ideological sort of perspectives. And many commentators have said these divisions have been growing wider and wider over the last several decades. And I don't want to really say why this is, because I don't know, but I just want to sort of maybe suggest some possible reasons and really more questions. So one issue that I wanted to explore is the mode of public dialogue, public consultation that we have. So at the moment, the prevailing mode is one of adversarialism. It's you have one or two positions which try to sort of win against the other. There's violence of public consultation. So that's that seems to be a very significant factor. And what's been happening, I don't know how much people here use social media, but on things like Facebook, Twitter, and also on things like pretty much anything to do with the internet, actually, there's this idea called an echo chamber, where people see only their own view reflected back at them. And I think also that might be significant for interfaith as well. So how do we not become an echo chamber? And so how do we interact with those whose views are different from us? So that when there is something like a referendum or an election, we're not stunned and shocked by the result of that. And because our perception of reality is very much shaped by who we interact with and who we're actually engaging with. And because of that, not just the fact that our perception of reality is skewed, but also our power to influence that reality is also limited severely.
I think one of the things which I thought I should share with you is, the title is Celebrating Interfaith Coexistence from Sikh Perspective. I think I would like to perhaps remind people we all know about the story of Lee Rigby. 3 years ago, a young black musician, Boyd D, raised the issue after this horrific murder. He said, coexistence, to live in peace with another or others, despite differences. Can we truly coexist? I think that was a big question which was raised at that time. And it has plagued humanity for centuries, and it seems to be that there are a whole range of questions around it. Does it mean that it's a fundamental requirement to survive, flourish, and continue? Because there may be peace at the end, or does it mean living parallel lives, side by side, own self-created boundaries, our own community spheres, places of worship, which only adherents can enter and feel secure and comfortable with, without disturbance of the otherness of the other. And some of us have been to all those places ourselves within our own situations. And if that is the situation, how can we even think of celebrating interfaith coexistence? I think that is a crucial issue for us to consider. And particularly in the light of what has been going on recently, where the pro-Brexit situation in the UK and Brexit plus situation in the leading to Trump presidency, it seems to me has put to some extent the clock back, the clock of coexistence back. And of course, in my own locality, in London, in other places, we have seen the rise of hate crime. Let's not forget that all is rosy.
My name is Harshal Sangrajka. I'm representing the Jain faith from the Institute of Jainology, which holds one Jain community of 30 organizations in the UK. I'm grateful to the organizations for giving me this opportunity. The title of my talk is The Three Aces of Jainism. Three Aces which I'm going to talk about are ahimsa, non-violence. I think many people have stolen my thunder already. The second one is A for Anekant, which means plurality. And the third one is Aparigraha, which means detachment from greed. Ahimsa is loosely translated as non-violence, but it is much deeper than this expression, which is primarily related to physical violence and sometimes limited to humans. So we don't consider violence to animals as violence in some cases. Ahimsa has to be practiced in thought, speech, and deeds. It also considers all three modes of action as equally important, and that is to do, to get it done, and to support the perpetrators. It is unique in Jainism that Ahimsa is related to all living beings, including animals, insects, and even the natural elements, which is earth, water, fire, air, and the vegetation. By defining the elements as living nature, Lord Mahavir was the first to protect the environment. Thus, one can state categorically that Ahimsa is the basic essential for peace in the world. In addition, it can eliminate the problems of climate change as well. Anekant is yet another unique doctrine of Jainism, which means plurality of views and beliefs. Problems arise when one not only believes in one's religion, but also insists that that is the only true path of emancipation. Jainism says that just as I have the right to believe in my religion, I have to recognize that others also have a right to believe in their religion, whether or not I agree with their philosophy. Just as an object placed in the middle of the room will offer a different view to those sitting around it, and yet each view will be true from that point of view. Hence, it is essential to accept that all different views are correct from their own point of view. Following the doctrine of Anekant can bring peace by eliminating the competition caused by difference of opinion, resulting in intolerance. Aparigraha, which preaches detachment from greed, can eliminate a lot of desire for ownership of things and beings for which we are willing to fight, kill, and bear enmity towards our own brethren. Greed for objects is indirectly responsible for poverty. It creates unnecessary demand of commodities, which elevates the price and renders a certain section of the community to live without such essentials. The three A's of Jainism can help eliminate many problems faced by the world today. It can bring peace, prosperity, health, wealth, amity, compassion, love, and satisfaction, and bliss in life. Thank you very much.
I'm not going to give you a talk. My learned gentlemen have all spoken, and ladies have all spoken so beautifully. But what I am just going to share with you is the essence of National Interfaith Week. As the organisers, there were two buzzwords, understanding and cooperation. And I think that for me is what Interfaith is all about. We understand each other, we come together and we start to understand each other, and then there can be cooperation. It's been my beautiful experience working with many different interfaiths. I was a treasurer for Leicester Interfaith in 1981. It's one of the oldest interfaiths going, and I was present at many unusual events over the years since then, and that has given me a great insight into different religions, but also the love we have for each other and our desire to be happy with each other, frankly, to be content with each other, to cooperate. We want to cooperate. We want to understand. And there are so many scenes I could share with you, but I think these two words, understanding and cooperation, are very important. So I'd like my little talk to be a tribute to those people who don't, not just the ones that stand here and share, but those who open the doors, make the tea, and are there year after year, really giving the ethos of what Interfaith, showing the ethos in their daily life and allowing a sacred space for us to all come together to share. Very important that those people are recognised. Dr. Russell, who was a Leicester Interfaith chair for 50 years, he's just recently left the body. He was a very quiet, unassuming man, but he did a lot of work behind the scenes. And there are many of you here do work behind the scenes. And this, we should really recognise in each other these wonderful people, and they are the stalwarts of Interfaith. There's one sitting here, Fergus. You know, such a heart and such energy, and they're quiet and they get on with it. And that's what it's all about, Interfaith's all about. Engagement, getting on with it, caring for each other, and giving each other that sacred space. So that's all I wanted to share. Tribute to you all in the interfaith world. Thank you.